Welcome to the Feet of Jesus, where we are going through the entire Bible, one book at a time, and we are in the book of Acts, and today we are studying Acts 23. I am in a really cool location. My husband and I are hiking Wheeler Peak Trail, and it is gorgeous. I think gorgeous would be really an understatement. You can see some of it behind me. This leads up to a gorgeous lake and this sort of secret waterfall. I even saw friends on the path. It was really fun. So this is awesome, and I'm going to get us started. So Acts 23. You know, Acts 23 really goes over, there's not a whole lot of startling new revelations, but there's maybe two things I'm going to highlight. So what happens in Acts 23? This is Paul being arrested, and then a plot against Paul that is planned and foiled. So that's where we are. One of the two bigger lessons that we're going to learn is the difference between providence, divine providence, and miracles. I am one, and I'll be honest with you, in studying for this, I really kind of learned the difference for the first time, or relearned the difference, I guess. The difference between providence and miracles. Miracles are God changing natural things in the world. For instance, turning water into wine. That was an outright miracle. Helping the man who was blind to see, helping the man who was lame to walk. Those are miracles. Providence is using, I have a definition here, it's an event where the supernatural is taking place behind the scenes. So God uses nature and natural things to work his wonderful goodness behind the scenes. And we get to see a lot of that here. One book to just highlight and help you see the difference and the definition of providence is Esther. Esther is a book completely about divine providence of God. It was using a woman, Esther, to affect his plan. And I just love that. And there's so much that we can do in our lives with providence. So what is the providence that happens? First of all, we have Paul, who he's been arrested, and he talks to the Sanhedrin and the Sadducees. Well, he talks to the Sanhedrin, which the Sanhedrin is kind of the court for the Jewish people. The Jewish people are divided into three different parties. I call them parties, but three different groups. There's the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. So what's the difference? The Essenes were the ones who lived by the Dead Sea. There's some evidence that John the Baptist hung out with the Essenes. The biggest difference, and the two groups that we hear a lot about, are the Pharisees and Sadducees. So the Pharisees believed in miracles. The Sadducees did not. And then we have the Pharisees believing in the resurrection, that we die and we are resurrected. The Sadducees did not. The Pharisees believed in angels and spirits and visions. The Sadducees did not. And then the Pharisees believed in the entire Old Testament. The Sadducees only believed in the first 5 books, which is the law, which is the books of Moses, the first 5 books of Moses. So that helps us see a little bit of the difference. So Paul is there giving his testimony, talking to them, and he gets them all riled up because he explains, I was a Pharisee. And so what does he say? It's right here, I think it's in verse 6. But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged. So do you hear what he did? Remember, Pharisees believe in the resurrection. Sadducees do not. So that one comment got the Pharisees going, well, yeah, he's right. This is about the resurrection. And the Sadducees are going, no, it's not. And so he gets them riled up and against each other, and they stop paying attention to Paul. So then Paul is brought to prison. He's taken to the barracks. Here's an interesting thing. You know where he's taken? He's taken to the Antonia fortress. Can you remember? Here's a little, what's the word? I've been hiking too long. Trivia, a little bit of trivia. Who else was housed in the Antonia fortress? Peter. What happened to Peter? His locks came off, his chains came off, the locks of the door came out, and he walked out. Do you remember? Does that happen to Paul? No, it doesn't. And, we might say, why? Why did Peter get this miraculous thing happen to him with the chains falling off and the prison doors opening, and Paul didn't? Well, right there we have the difference between a miracle and divine providence. Do you remember what the entire theme of Acts is? The entire theme of Acts is getting the gospel from Jerusalem to Rome. Well, how are we going to do that? How is God going to get the gospel to Rome? He's going to use Paul because Paul really wanted to be the one to be able to take the gospel to Rome. And how is he going to do it? He's going to do it through Paul being a prisoner and being taken to Rome as a Roman citizen to stand trial over there. And so we get to see this beautiful little moment in Acts 23:11. It says, but so he's in jail and he's discouraged. Things just aren't going the way he wanted. And he'd been beaten, he'd been jailed before, and I think he's just kind of down. And then it says, but the following night, the Lord stood by him and said, be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also be witness at Rome. Paul's going to get to Rome. I can just envision him in the prison cell. He's kind of just sitting there, and God shows up. Do you know how many times God shows up for Paul in the Bible? 5 times. I can just picture Paul going, just at the sight of God, right? And then not only does he get to see God, but God tells him he's going to get to Rome. That is his goal. He gets to do it. And you know what? I think Paul's heart was like, however you get me to do it, I want to do it. I don't think it mattered to Paul that he was going there in chains. I think Paul was totally driven to get the gospel to Rome. And this is God himself telling him he's going to get to do it. Such an awesome moment. So, sometimes in our lives, sometimes God delivers like he delivered Peter. But sometimes he gives us the strength to endure. And that's what I'd like you to think through. And I have a couple very loyal people who comment on these videos every week. And that would be what I'd love for you to comment on. Maybe think of a time when he delivered you, and think of a time when he has allowed you, given you the strength to endure. That would be an awesome thing. So, looking at my notes, see, my notes were pretty extensive. I even had to resort to little notes here. So I think that's where I wanted to stop. When there is trouble in your life, and we've all seen it lately, this first half of 2020 has been a doozy. And I want us to go back to verse 11 when we've had trouble. Verse 11, but the following night, the Lord stood by him. Is the Lord standing by you right now? Yeah, he is. I will never leave you nor forsake you, remember? And said, be of good cheer, Paul. Cheer up, Paul. Nothing's wrong. Cheer up. I'm going to get you to Rome. God wants to help you achieve the goals that are within his will. And it was within his will for Paul to get to Rome. And he did it. He got him there. Love it. So I'm going to move over and get my workbook. So hang tight for just a second. Okay, my workbook. I am only going to do 2 verses this week. I know we only had 3, but I'm going to do the first 2. So I'm going to do Acts 23:11 and Acts 23:15. So starting on Acts 23:11, it says, the following night the Lord stood near Paul and said, take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome. We were just kind of talking about that, right? I love how God helped fulfill Paul's desires and how he is so there to protect ours. God is in every moment using divine providence to reach us and others. You know, there's the verse, Jeremiah 29:13 or 29:11, where, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. God was there to give Paul hope and a future. Do not let his eventual execution let you think for a minute that God wasn't there and that God didn't fulfill Paul's desires. He fulfilled his desires and more. And then he got to go be with God. We think of death as such a sad, awful thing. But that is the end result of a life well lived. And then we get to go be with God in paradise. It's not such a bad thing, I think. So I know I need to remember and I need to see God's divine providence in my life. And that was my application, my takeaway from my heart, is just to see that God is there. And even when miracles aren't standing in my path, divine providence is. Divine providence has been all over my life, using my husband to help bring me to the faith, and using that new baby faith to get me excited about learning, and then getting that my love for education and teaching to delve right and collide with the learning I had done to want to teach others. I see him all over the place. So then let's get to Acts 23:15. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here. Okay, so I need to give you a little, because we didn't go over this really on the overview. So Paul is arrested. Paul is in his prison cell. God visits him, says he's going to go to Rome. He's all excited. For the first time, we hear that he has a sister, that Paul has a sister. And his sister's son, Paul's nephew, comes to him and says, so there's 40 Jews that make this pact that they are going to have a hunger strike until they kill Paul. And somehow the nephew hears about it, and the nephew goes and tells Paul. Paul gets one of the guards to come, because as a Roman citizen, he had the ability to have sort of a little bit of power there. So he got one of the guards to come and go get one of the centurions. Remember, the centurion was in charge of 100 people. So this was a big guy. So the centurion came, took the nephew kind of sweetly by his side and said, okay, tell me what you heard. So he heard it, and then you learn later that he actually escaped. Okay, so just a tiny bit more explanation. So that was the plot. The 40 people wanting to kill him, sending a note to the commanders that have him captured, that the Sanhedrin, have a little bit more information. And the plot is that as they bring him to the Sanhedrin for more information, they're going to ambush Paul and kill him. So the nephew, who we think probably was there, heard all of this, and he goes and tells Paul. Paul gets the guard, tells the guard, this is what's going to happen, and so on and so forth. I already gave you that information. So we are in Acts 23:15. We are at the verse where they are plotting what's going to happen. And they're telling the person who's going to go to the jail to get Paul, they're telling him what to say. Okay. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him, Paul, before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here. So, the biggest thing that struck me was just how much people can try to get in the way of God's plan, and how much hate people can have sometimes. And it just really occurred to me here, why did they hate Paul so much? Why did they hate Paul so much? In a verse somewhere, and I can't remember exactly where it is right now, I think it's in Romans, Paul says, I would give my very soul for my Jewish people, for my Jewish brethren to be able to go to heaven and see the truth. And so that's how much he loves these people who are plotting to kill him in an ambush and doing a hunger strike to cause it. And so it just makes no sense. So Alan and I, my husband and I, were out of town, obviously, and we were talking about it at dinner. And I was saying, why do you think Paul was hated so much? And he said,
because he was one of them. He was someone they trusted. He was an up-and-comer, and then he, of all people, betrayed them and is now with the people that they hated so much.
Yeah. And furthermore, he's preaching this stuff to the Gentiles who they thought were, remember, they stoked the fires of hell. So boil that down. What does that mean? Their hearts had gotten so filled with worry and fear and revenge and unforgiveness and hatred and bitterness that they became blind and deaf to the word of God. Isn't it great that that can't happen to us? My tongue is firmly in my cheek. Absolutely. That is one, it woke me up. I have got to forgive where forgiveness is needed. I need to stop worrying. God's got this. God has a plan. He knows what he's doing with this coronavirus, with financial issues that this coronavirus is causing, with fear, with the bitterness and the hatred that's going around, with all the division and the upset that people are feeling. We've got to get away from those feelings, because those feelings will blind us and make us deaf to the word of God. So let's disagree. Let's disagree and love each other anyway. Let's do this. Let's do what we can to reach people that have not been reached yet. You know, because I'm in ministry, I have people coming out of the woodwork asking me about the end times. Are we in the end times? I will say this. We are closer than we've ever been. And our job has not changed. Our job is to reach people. And you know what? If by telling you that we're in the end times gets you to really think about who you need to reach, think that through in your own heart. There's people in your life that we need to reach. Let's do it together. So, help me. Let's get people on this. I have 93 subscribers, and let's get to 100. Let's get things rocking and rolling. Let's get people in the gospel. Let's do this. Folks, what are we going to put at the feet of Jesus? We are going to put worry and bitterness and revenge and hatred. That's what we're going to put at the feet of Jesus, because God's got this. There's no reason for those emotions to be part of us as the children of God. And look at this beautiful, beautiful planet that God has allowed us to live on. We have joy and love and kindness as part of our day every day. So friends, I love you. By the grace of God, we're going to get this done, because we had to film this a few times in choppy little parts, but God's going to help us get it all put together and get this up on YouTube by Sunday night. So I will say, by the way, here's the workbook. I never got to that before, but God's got this. God's got you. God's got me. God's got our family. I love you, friends. Mwah.